The National Cable Television Association's annual cable show is being held in Washington, D.C. this year, and C-SPAN and the Communicators were on location to talk with some of the leading cable providers, programmers, and technical folks. And we'll be showing you those interviews over the next several weeks on the Communicators. Coming up this week, Brian Roberts, chairman of Comcast, Bonnie Hammer, who is president of NBC Universal's Cable Entertainment Division, and Matt Polka, who is president of the American Cable Association. It's an association that represents smaller cable operators. In future weeks, you'll be able to see Philippe Domont, who is president and CEO of Viacom, as well as Amy Tyson, who is president and chairman of Bend Broadband, a cable operator in Bend, Oregon. And in our third week of interviews, we'll introduce you to some of the technology that's being used and being developed for use in the cable industry. So coming up next, Brian Roberts, chairman of Comcast. Brian Roberts, when you think about Comcast 5-10 years down the road from now, what do you envision?
First of all, I get very excited when you walk around this show and you see all the new applications. I just did a tour where you can look at your energy of your home, you can think about healthcare, you can look at things way beyond just cable TV and where the company has its roots when my dad started Comcast 40 years ago. And every few years the technology enables new applications, whether it was basic cable or HBO. Then one day we went into high-speed internet, telephone, and just the energy of the pace, this acceleration of change. And I think we have the best network with the most two-way capabilities, and the future is going to be different, but very exciting.
So where do the revenue streams come from? Is it from your video product, your non-video products?
Well, if you go back just maybe 5 to 10 years ago, not even 10 years ago, when we really invented broadband as a cable industry, and it was at one of these conventions, we showcased the very first high-speed internet. There was no Google, there was no Amazon, there was no eBay, there was no Yahoo, Facebook, MySpace as public companies. And in just that short period of time, maybe 11 years, together collectively, the world's changed. So as I think about the next 10 years, in those first 10 years, half our revenues are now television. Internet and phone and high definition, but traditional cable TV is down to less than half, and television totally, all television is only about 60%. We go into small, medium-sized businesses with Comcast Business Class. So as you think about the next 10 years and we think about beyond entertainment, we talk about communications and cross-platform services and wireless and have whatever you want, wherever you want it. I think revenues will follow where the consumer activity is. And if the consumer is living on broadband, they're still using their TV and they have a home theater with 3D, which we're demonstrating how simple that conversion can be if we put more bandwidth at 3D technologies. I think it's a very exciting business to be in.
Well, with technology changing as fast as it is today, how do you build a business model around that?
That's a great question, and my own view is you don't want to make the big mistake. So different consumers want different things. So it used to be you'd make a big bet, here's my new product, everyone wants to get a new type of Coca-Cola. And you might get it right, you might get it wrong. In today's world, we think we have to have our platform capable of any user experience so that some really are high tech and some just want to sit back and watch a movie. And we have to have the array of ease and yet complexity. So my view is if you have the fastest internet, we call Project Infinity, which is you can get anything you want, anytime you want. So nobody can have a better vision than Infinity for entertainment consumption on any device you want. And then put it together in a communication suite, all with state-of-the-art technology. That's why, and give you a customer experience, because we can't forget service is probably the most important part of the equation. Show up on time, if you get it wrong, fix it and say we're sorry. These are the goals for the company for the next few years, and I think we're off to a pretty exciting period here in an economy that has obviously slowed down big time. This is a chance for us to pull ahead if we stay focused and execute.
Well, speaking of the economy, Mr. Roberts, how is it that Comcast can continued to invest in new technology, and how are your consumers reacting to the economic situation?
Well, we have to be sensitive and listen well to what our consumer needs are, and certainly many consumers are saying, hey, help me with my bill, help me figure out how to not get into financial hardship more than I already am. Can you help me out? And we work one by one and figure out if you have the right package of services. And we've created some new products, whether they're economy tiers for high-speed internet, economy phone service, even economy video service. On the other side, many customers are saying, this is the most important product in my life. I've cut back other things. My home and my communications and my entertainment in my living room and in my house and to my kids means more to me than it's ever meant. I want the best. So we're speeding up and investing in something called DOCSIS 3.0, where we'll have 50 to 100 megabits a second available in 70% of our company this year. The first cable company really to do that. Our view is take the risk and invest. That's why we got larger. That's what we have not wanted to borrow too much money beyond a certain level and say we want a first job, put it back into the business and try to have the best suite of products, better than any of our competitors. That's how the company will succeed in the long run, and hopefully we can withstand economies like the one we're living in right now.
Well, a lot of economic proposals, economic stimulus proposals are coming out of the new administration and the Congress. How do you see them benefiting Comcast and the consumer?
Well, we're hoping that a lot of the stimulus will focus on unserved areas that when I meet members of Congress and the frustration in rural America and is understandable. We want to stay up. This is an enabler. If we could have access, then we can have some of the benefits that everybody else has and still maintain, whether it's a farm or living in a different part of the country. So that's, I think, number one. Number two is hopefully to help people who need the money, who want these products for educational needs and for many other legitimate and very valuable purposes. So somehow the government hopefully isn't going to pick winners and losers between all the technologies. Is this better than that? A lot of it hopefully is around education and what are the right things to do when you finally have access to broadband. What are the right ways to take advantage of it and learn? And if you're a teacher or if you're, I've seen a lot of programs who are asking for funds that I think are going to accelerate the divide and narrow that divide, accelerate the narrowing of that divide. And it's being talked about right now, real time, so it's not clear how that money's going to get spent. But our goal is we're not looking for any advantages over a Verizon or over some of the other competitors, AT&T. We think it should go to the users and to unserved areas. It would be my view anyway.
When you look at your competitors and you look at Congress and the FCC, is there parity among regulation?
Not necessarily, but that each of us have grown up in different industries. The phone industry grew up one way, satellite grew up another, cable grew up somewhere else. And I do think over time, these businesses are very competitive right now. If you talk to anybody walking around this convention and say, what's happening in your business? In our industry, probably half of the time they talk about the economy, but the other half they'd say, hey, we have real competition at an unprecedented level, whether it's wireless or satellite or phone companies or many other things on the drawing board that compete with just a part of your business. So, and sometimes the competition is good for our business when it's coming from the broadband application, but gee, people may not watch as many movies on demand because they can get it from Netflix, and we're okay with that. And they're playing Xbox Live and they're not watching as much TV. And we're okay with that too. So sometimes it's very complicated, but at the end of it, there should be some attempt to try to create some parity. Ultimately, have regulations that are necessary but are not restrictive and slowing us down. So the question you were talking about earlier, are there impediments to investing versus regulations that are maybe obsolete and safeguards for consumers? As in this space, I think there's competition that is real. In some other places, the government took some regulations off that we're all paying heavy consequences for it. So I think we welcome a good discussion and new energy put at the question, but ultimately, I think this is a very capital-intensive business, and the nub of your first question was, how can you be investing while others are suffering? That's a business judgment that we're constantly reassessing, and in some areas we've cut back, but our view is give better service, accelerate our new products, take a risk, and hopefully the government's encouraging that, not trying to slow that down. I'm sure that's the way they're going to be thinking.
What else is on your legislative priority list, if anything?
Well, I think there will be a lot of issues being discussed around net neutrality, and I think very strongly the industry, again, take something like DOCSIS 3.0. It doesn't exist, 100 megabits of speed. I've been around to some of the Silicon Valley and Microsofts of the world and said, okay, what do we do with 100 megabits in your house? And some people have said, we have no idea. So you'd hate to regulate prematurely a new speed before it even exists. On the other hand, I think back that when we went to 3 megabits a second 11 years ago, nobody had any idea what to do with that. The best idea was to send pictures. And today we live on the web. Pictures seem obsolete. It's all video, it's graphic rich, it's high definition. So where we're going to be in 10 years, it's just so exciting. And I think the government, hopefully, if they feel the need to have new rules, will try to think about not crimping that innovation while making sure it's a fair and competitive future for so many to prosper in.
Brian Roberts is chairman of Comcast. Thank you for being on the Communicators.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Comcast, based in Philadelphia, was founded by Brian Roberts' father about 50 years ago. Coming up next, Bonnie Hammer. She is president of NBC Universal's Cable Entertainment Division. We talked to her about some of the issues that her industry is facing. Bonnie Hammer, how would you define NBC Universal? What kind of company is it?
It's a large company, very successful company that has many different components, combination of broadcast, cable, film, parks. I mean, it's a huge, huge company that happens to work very much like a family and work together in different ways across a lot of different platforms.
And what's your role in that company?
I am the president of Cable Entertainment and Cable Studio, which means I oversee USA Network, Sci-Fi Channel, a slew of emerging networks, Chiller, Sleuth, UniHD, and I'm also responsible for original scripted programming that we produce out of the Cable Studio.
Such as?
Such as we produce Psych, we produce Monk, we produce Battlestar Galactica, In Plain Sight. Right now, between USA and Sci-Fi, I would say we are producing approximately 6 original series that we own and we're responsible for, with hopefully more to come.
Recently I read that NBC Universal could be described as a cable network that happens to do broadcasting. Is that a fair assessment?
What I think is happening is the business is changing, the business models are changing, and right now cable is really taking a huge share away from broadcast. You know, people have said that the broadcast model is broken, and cable has a wonderful model of 2 streams of revenue, which really keeps us alive and thriving. And where NBC is very much, you know, a part of the company clearly, and because it is in the title of the company, the perception was that it was a broadcast company first and foremost. But what's happening, if you look at NBCU, it has entertainment cable, which includes my channels, also Bravo and Oxygen. It also has news cable, MSNBC, CNBC. I mean, it's really a very strong cable company, as well as a broadcast company and a film company and a parks company. So there are a lot of components, but the cable group right now is very, very powerful, both from a ratings and a profitability point of view.
Do you agree that the broadcast model is broken in today's world?
I don't know if I would say it's necessarily broken. but I think everybody has to look at their business model, and it has to change. When broadcast grew up, there were 3 broadcast networks and maybe a little public access, and then of course public broadcasting. There was no other competition. So the share that they got of the audience and the money they could spend based on the advertising that came in because of the eyeballs that they aggregated was immense. Now there's so much fragmentation in the audience, and there are now what would be considered 5 broadcasters and then 70 plus cable channels, those that are rated, and of course news cable and everything else. There's so much fragmentation that they're sharing the advertiser dollars, and that's their only source of revenue, where we also have an advertising model, but we also have an affiliate model, syndication model. So we are benefited by having 2 streams of revenue, and it just offers us a form of stability right now, especially in a very tough economic time.
Well, Bonnie Hammer, there's a whole generation growing up who aren't used to paying for things such as a cable bill. They're used to watching things live or free over the internet. What does that do to the business model, and is that a bad trend?
Nobody really knows. I think we're all cautious, and I think everything is changing for us in this business. And I think to ignore the fact that online, that people are watching online is nuts. So I think we all have to put our toes in the water and experiment and figure out where that's going to go. I have a 15-year-old son, and he will watch much of what he watches on his computer. However, what happens is he may download from Hulu, or he may download from iTunes a bunch of, for example, Office episodes, which of course I can get him, but he's still going to download it because it's easier. But what has happened is he will watch that when he can, but then he has appointment viewing for the original episode that's going to air on Thursday night, so he can talk about it the next day with his friends at school, or even more insidious in some ways, they will co-watch. He and his friends will co-watch an episode of The Office or 24 or Entourage, and they will iChat through the entire episode live. So the experience is changing, and I think right now online is additive. It may not be down the road, it may take away, but right now it's additive. It's throwing those kids back to watch certain episodes live. So I think there's a lot of noise around online, stealing viewers from the mothership, from that big television screen. But right now, research and the actual measures that are saying how much is really being watched is not huge. But the teen population, I think, as they grow older and they become the subscribers and they're the ones that are paying for things, I think it will change with time. But right now, there's more noise about it than there is actual pulling eyeballs off the main screen. I think even some research was done between 07 and 08 that people are actually watching 5 hours more on TV in 08 than they did in 07. I think it's 5 hours a month. It was more in 08
of the actual
or 07.
television
Of the
itself.
actual television. So who knows? But I think we can't be so naive to say it's not changing. I think we all have to just balance, what we do and what the habits are, and make sure we're ready, if and when change actually happens, but also protect the mothership as well.
How much market research do you get from your 15-year-old?
Oh,
Observing
my.
him.
I've actually started using him to watch pilots that we do. I find that his gut, our core audience isn't necessarily 15-year-olds, but, he's smart, he knows character, he knows story, and so far, every show that he has said, before we put it out for research, that he really liked and why, and others that he might have been more tentative with, when we get the research back, which is primarily 18 to 49, he's on the money, absolutely on the money. So he is my private focus group.
And when you talk about how everybody needs to dip their toe in and experiment a little, what kind of experiments are you leading over at NBCU?
Well, we do stream certain number of episodes, but we're very careful about it. But what we do is try to create additive value, meaning we will, for example, we have Monk on the air now for 8 years, hugely successful cable original series. And where we're going next as Monk goes away in its final season, we're doing something called Little Monk. We're creating basically an animation, online, original content coming off of a major series that's been a huge success. A show like Burn Notice, for example, is a huge hit. It's the #1 new original series in all of cable. But we create complementary content that'll go online. For example, we have a game called Covert Ops. Burn Notice is about an operator that got burned, lost his identity, is trying to find out who burned him. So we have an online game that basically creates some engagement online, makes them get to know the characters better. They have a place to play in between episodes, and ultimately they come back to watch the next episode. So it creates engagement in another place when the episode isn't available.
And you're finding that people are going?
Absolutely. We've had our growth online with new original content connected to our series that are on air has grown tremendously over the last couple of years.
Do you ever foresee, Bonnie Hammer, where NBC in general will one-off, will put The Office on the air, immediately put it online for $1.99, just like you could buy a song off iTunes?
I can't say that I don't think any of us knows. I think what everybody will be cautious about is, will it hurt the profitability of their main business? Right now, nobody really knows how to monetize on air, online. They haven't found the perfect equation. Where are you going to make your money? How much money can you make? And will it steal from where your larger source of revenue and income is? I don't think anybody has the answer. I do believe people will be experimenting with a lot of different models to see where it goes, to see if it harms or adds to their main business, which is the television business.
And finally, we're here in Washington at the annual cable show. When it comes to Congress and the FCC, do you keep an eye on what they're doing and what you're doing so that you stay in their good graces?
We are always, there's always a finger on the pulse of that. I mean, I don't personally do it, but we have a fabulous attorney, Rick Cotton, who is responsible for all of that. And he basically tells us where we have to be careful, what we need to do, what we have to watch out for, and how to be good partners.
Bonnie Hammer of NBCU, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And that was Bonnie Hammer of NBC Universal. Matt Polka is president of the American Cable Association, and we spoke with him about some of the issues that smaller cable operators are facing.
Matt Polka of the American Cable Association. Thanks for being on the Communicators.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit, when you come to these shows, how do you look at this, what's offered, the kind of seminars, what's being talked about? How does it relate to your cable system as opposed to other cable systems?
Sure. Well, we're focused on public policy mostly as an association that represents 1,000 cable companies across the country, mostly smaller, independent in smaller markets, rural areas. And we're looking at the public policy component on how do laws and regulations affect rolling out voice, video, phone services in the smaller markets, which is vastly different than in urban areas. And we as an independent association are always looking to help promote small businesses and making sure that advanced services are available to consumers all across the country, really in the smallest markets, just the same as they are in the urban areas.
Now in the world of public policy, is it the FCC you're mainly looking at, or are there other areas?
Capitol Hill, Congress and the Senate. We work with the FCC quite a lot. We're working right now with the National Telecommunications Information Administration, the Rural Utility Service, because of the broadband stimulus work that's taking place. We've also had experience with the SBA Office of Advocacy, Department of Justice, Federal Trade Commission. Wherever there's a telecommunications issue affecting smaller markets or companies that are providing services in smaller markets, we're generally active on those venues.
When there's a decision made at one of those bodies, does it affect a larger cable system differently than yours? And I guess in specific regulation, does it affect you guys?
It does, and in fact, that's really one of the reasons why our association exists. We started this association as independent operators, of which I was one, back in 1993, after Congress re-regulated the cable industry and reimposed rate regulation. the difference was for us, that regulation had a disproportionate impact on smaller companies, of which I was a member of one, because we have fewer customers per mile. Any law or regulation has an embedded cost, sort of an unfunded mandate. You have to pay for that regulation. If you have fewer customers per mile, that means a higher cost per subscriber for that cost of regulation. And that, in smaller markets, can make the difference between a business that's viable or a business that's dying.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Pole attachments is one good example. Pole attachments. I'll come back to another one. Emergency alert. Okay, the emergency alert system, a better example. A few years ago, the FCC imposed emergency alert regulations that cost basically to provide emergency alert about $10,000 per cable system.
And is that what goes on your television with the noise?
Yes, the
in
crawl,
between?
exactly.
Yeah.
For a system here in Washington or New York or Pittsburgh, where I'm from, a large system, when you have hundreds of thousands of subscribers, $10,000 over that customer base is nothing. When you have 100 subscribers, that's a lot of money, and might make the difference between whether you can provide advanced broadband, digital, voice services, or whether you can't.
When you go to Capitol Hill, do you get an ear equal to a larger cable system?
I think so, certainly, and this is the reason. What Washington is interested in right now, and they have been saying for a long time, is we want to get advanced services, broadband, out into the farthest reaches of rural areas. Well, the truth is that if anybody's going to provide that service, it's going to be our members. It's not going to be the larger companies, whether phone or cable, because frankly their business plans are focused on urban areas that have higher densities. But our members generally live and work in the communities they serve. So if broadband is going to happen out in those markets, it's going to be the smaller companies that are going to provide it, rather than the big ones coming in to actually provide that service.
So in light of that, tell us a little bit about your role, especially in light of the stimulus package that was signed and the provisions that were made for broadband expansion.
Yes, $7.2 billion, 4.7 at the NCTA, 2.5 at the Rural Utility Service. Our members are generally entrepreneurial. They're small companies. They've been in the cable business for decades. They have generally not gone to seek help from the government for their financing. However, we're in a situation now where there is a vast sum of money that is available for broadband deployment. And our members see an opportunity, particularly within the NCTA, which is going to be a grant program, where the kinds of projects that they're interested in expanding their broadband to the last mile where broadband doesn't exist, and also building the middle mile, getting more fiber internet backbone deeper into the rural communities. It's not that our members generally cannot provide broadband, they're generally spaced to provide even next generation broadband. What the problem is there's just not enough backbone, there's not enough of an internet pipe, so to speak, into the systems that they can tap into to get the higher broadband speeds. So we're trying to get those higher speeds into rural markets, smaller markets, and extend our plant to that last mile where broadband doesn't exist today.
Matt Polka, the American Cable Association. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much. Pleasure to be here.
The Communicators is available also to watch online. We archive a lot of our material, and you can go to cspan.org. Up at the top it says C-SPAN Series. Click on that and you'll see the Communicators, and it'll take you right there, and you'll be able to see a lot of our past programming. Coming up next week on the Communicators, Philippe Domont, who is president and CEO of Viacom, Amy Tyson, who runs a cable operation in Bend, Oregon, and also we talked with Michael Lee of Rogers Communications out of Toronto, Canada, to get an international perspective.